So I'll lay the color in the center of the shape and pull it and guide it where I'd like it to go, which is pretty much over the entire inner ear. And I think I'll lay it in over here too. Just fill it in. This whole area down here is going to be a brownish black. And thin out the edge of the color. Layer by layer now, we'll begin to create the brownish black of the ear. So I'm laying it right over the darkest part. And thinning it out as we get over to this side. So we've got it darker there. And you see right here, you can just gently grab the edge and pull and guide the color. And there we can see the darkest part and the darkest around the edge. And we've created a mid-tone, a not so dark. Let's move into the hair markings that we can see in the ear. When you emulate the curve of the hairs, that will help to create contour in the ear. I'm using a very gentle touch. And we're not going to need a lot of hairs here, just a couple. Tiny bit of color on the brush. What I'm seeing is the hairs curving like that. I think they're kind of curving inward. I'm barely touching the brush to the paper. These are pretty pale at first, and then I'll lay in some darker hairs where needed. And what I'll do now is pretty much what I did before, just go in and reinforce the darkest parts, and that will be followed by mid-tones. So I'm picking up color on the palette that's not as thick. You see how thin that is? Using a very gentle touch. That will slightly smooth textures and unify everything. And now that it's wet, I'll use my zero brush and pick up a slightly thicker consistency, but it's not the darkest, but I'd like it to be a little darker here. A very gentle touch. And you can take it a little bit darker while it's damp. Lay the color in the center. Pull it and guide it around. I'm not quite touching the edge yet, and it's okay if you end up with some hard edges. While that's still damp, you can pick up a slightly thicker consistency and touch it in over here where it's going to be black. It's almost like going wet and wet now. See how dark that is? And I'll move to the next black shape, which is right here. I'm still seeing mostly a brownish black. I've got just a bit of color on my zero brush, and what I'll do first is lay in the edge of the shape, actually creating hairs. So looking at the direction of the hairs, that will dry very quickly, and I'll go right in and pick up some pink mix and lay it in down here, starting in the center and then guiding it around where you'd like it to go. And you see I'm covering where it's going to be black. I'm going right over the nostrils. Now the next thing I'd like to do is give attention to these folds. We've got the darkest shapes in place, and to create a smooth transition from the very dark shape into lighter values, I need to lay in a bit of color next to these dark shapes that isn't quite as dark. I'm taking it a little further out, and I'll soften that edge, and what we're doing is creating a smooth transition from the very dark shape into a lighter value. And I think the next thing I'll do here is lay in some darker hairs. And I'm being aware of the curve of the hairs. This pig is slowly coming together, and by laying in the dark values first, it's providing insight as to what to do next, especially with the pale fur. I think I'll move in here and work on these folds. To create them, what I'll do is take it darker in value right along the line of the fold, and then little by little, moving this way, apply lighter values, and that will help to create the impression that the fold is curving outward. And now I'm led to the darker values here. So I'll return to this area, which contains dark brown to gray hairs. So it's back to the gray on the palette. I'll use the consistency of thin milk. So make sure that's dry. Now what I'll do first is lay in an edge here of hairs. Just the beginnings of hairs. Just a bit of color on the brush. These applications of gray are leading me into what to do here. And I think what I'll do is first lay in pale hairs and then little by little go darker. This is like tea to thin milk. And I'm using a super gentle touch. Barely touching the brush to the paper. I'm looking at the direction of the hairs. creating the curving that I see in the photo. Before laying in the final glazes and refinements, I'd like to anchor this pig with a shadow, and I'm keeping it simple. And now I'll use glazes to make adjustments in color and value and to slightly adjust textures. I'll use this gouache to create some lighter hairs that I see. For example, right over here, we've got some lighter hairs going up here through this dark area. I'm using the very tip of the brush, and I'll vary the consistency until I'm happy with what I've got. That's a little thick, but I'll see if I can thin it out. There we go. I thinned it out. I think I'll cross over some hairs. I'm laying a bit of color over that part of the gouache to help it fit in a little better. And this pig is finished. I hope you've learned something from this course and had fun. Thanks for watching.